My name is Yuri Melich, Y-U-R-I-M-E-L-I-C-H.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, sir.
You are the lead detective in this case.
Correct.
Okay. And as part of your job as lead detective in this case, you have executed several search warrants of the Anthony home.
Yes.
Okay. And the first one was in August?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. And at the time that you did the search in August, did you find any papers dealing with chloroform in the home?
I don't recall finding any papers in the home, no.
No printouts from how to make it or any instructions on anything having to do with chloroform?
No, sir, not at all.
Okay. Did you find any containers that at one time or another contained chloroform?
No, not at all.
Did you find any rags that at one time were used to, that had chloroform on them?
No.
Did you find any products that were used to make chloroform?
No.
Okay. Did you find any receipts on purchases of chloroform?
No.
Did you find any chemistry kits of the kind that might have been used to make chloroform?
No.
Okay. You then executed a second search warrant in December, on December 11th of 2008, correct?
Yes.
And on that occasion, did you find any receipts of purchases of chloroform?
No.
Did you find any containers that may have contained chloroform?
No.
Any rags or any cloth material that might have contained chloroform?
No.
Any chemistry kits that might have contained chloroform or been used to create chloroform?
No.
Any of the other items that I previously mentioned?
No, sir.
Were you looking for that?
I'd have to check the search warrant to see what was listed as far as the scope of the warrant.
If I showed you a copy of the warrant, would that assist you?
Yes, please.
Okay. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Thank you.
Where you're specifically looking at the search warrant of December 11th, is that not correct, sir?
That is correct.
Take your time and look.
Yes, sir. And your question again?
The question is, did you look for any of these items?
Yes, in the search warrant we did.
Okay. Now I'm going to show you the third search warrant that you did on December 20th, 2008. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Thank you. Sir, I believe this is still December 11th.
Oh.
December 20th is right behind it, stapled.
Oh, okay. Did you, on your search warrant of December 20th, the third time going in there, did you also look again for chloroform items and all of the items that I just finished running down?
No, sir. The scope of the search warrant didn't include anything to do with chloroform or items used to make chloroform.
Okay. And the reason for that would have been?
We already conducted the search for the chloroform products on December 11th.
Okay. And you don't think you would have missed anything on December 11th through when you went back in there on the 20th?
Not to say I wouldn't have missed anything. We just didn't include it in the scope of the December 20th search warrant.
And would that have been because you did such a thorough job on December 11th?
I wouldn't disagree. We had no reason to incorporate it in that December 20th search warrant. We'd already looked for it in December 11th.
Okay. But if you had happened to come across a chemistry kit, you certainly would have confiscated it or photographed it.
We would have done it legally and stopped it and gotten an addendum to the search warrant, yes.
Okay. Did you find any chloroform at any given time in the Anthony home throughout the entire time you've been investigating this case?
No.
I have no further questions. May I get the...
You may retrieve the items. Cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Detective Melich.
Good afternoon.
On August 8th, when that search warrant was done at the Anthony residence, you did not have any preliminary or other results from the Oak Ridge National Laboratory regarding high levels of chloroform on carpet samples in the trunk, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. When that information was provided to you and ultimately became public knowledge, that was closer to the end of August, beginning of September of 2008, correct?
Yes.
At that point in time, Ms. Anthony was out of jail and living at home?
I don't recall specifically the dates she was in and out of jail, but I would presume so, yes.
Okay. Was she not out of jail between August 22nd and October 14th, 2008?
Yes, I do believe so.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have nothing else.
Redirect as to those issues.
When someone is out on bail, that doesn't preclude you from getting a search warrant and searching their home, does it?
I can get a search warrant whenever I believe there's probable cause to have a search warrant issued. So I can get a search warrant anytime as an investigator I would believe it would be necessary. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. And you got the preliminary results from the Oak Ridge National Laboratory in late August, did you not?
Yes, that's correct.
And then you got the computer results shortly thereafter.
That's correct.
Okay. Tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, after you got that information, how soon you went in to get another search warrant.
After getting that information, the next search warrant would have been on December 11th of 2008.
Okay. So you waited how many months?
From the time in August to December 11th. So it'd be September, October, November, and into December.
And you didn't think that evidence was significant enough for you to get a search warrant to go look for those items, did you?
Not necessarily. It was obviously very significant, but as to just using that to get a search warrant for the house, no, I did not do that. That's obvious.
Okay. And when you finally did search the home, both times, you never saw anything of the kind.
Now, may I also address your previous question?
Sure.
Also, at the time in August, we were still looking for a live child as well. So even though we had these indications of chloroform in the trunk and in the computer, we were still looking for a live child. So
when Casey was first arrested, that was the day after, it was July 16th, 2008, right?
correct.
Okay. And then on October 14th, she was then arrested again for more serious charges, correct?
Yes, sir. After October 14th, we were no longer looking
And you were
for a
no
live
longer
child.
on October 14th because you had charged her with murder, looking
Correct.
for a live child, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So October 14th, November 14th, December 1st, all those times, you never went in there with a search warrant to look for these items.
Until December 11th. That's correct.
Okay. No further questions.
May the detective be excused.
Yes, no recalls.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you, detective.
Am I excused or subject?
Well, Mr. Baez says subject to recall, so you're excused for the day.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir. The defense may call the next witness.
Yes, sir.
I'm Marcus Bain Wise, Marcus Bain Wisc.
Good afternoon, sir. Can you see me over there?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Good afternoon.
Can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what your occupation is?
I'm a research scientist at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. My specialty is analytical chemistry, and particularly the development of analytical methods and field analytical instrumentation.
Okay. And can you tell us, sir, your educational background?
I have a PhD in analytical chemistry from Purdue University, chemistry degrees and master's degrees from Furman University.
Okay. And have you taken, do you have any additional training in the areas of analytical chemistry?
That is primarily my education, plus my on-the-job training over many years.
Okay. And how long have you worked for the Oak Ridge National Laboratories?
I've been at Oak Ridge National Laboratory almost 27 years.
Okay. And did you start that job right out of school?
Yes, I did.
Okay, well, that eliminates your job history. And do you belong to any specific types of organizations?
Yes, I do.
Which ones?
I belong to the Boy Scouts of America.
Professional organizations.
I do not at this particular time.
Okay. And have you ever published any articles on chemistry or analytical chemistry?
Yes, I have.
Okay. How many times?
I don't know the number right off the top of my head.
Okay. Can you give us a ballpark?
Oh, probably 15 to 20.
And have you lectured on the topic of analytical chemistry?
Yes, I have.
And have you given any presentations in that area?
Yes, I have.
Okay. And what about any awards? Have you received any awards in that area?
Yes, I have. I've won some awards in the past.
Okay. Is this the first time you've ever testified in court?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Judge, at this time, I would move to enter Dr. Weiss as an expert in analytical chemistry.
Absolutely no objection, Judge.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Dr. Weiss will be accepted as an expert witness in the field of analytical chemistry. You may continue.
Thank you, sir. Now, sir, you mentioned you are a research scientist.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And what exactly does that mean?
A research scientist works on challenging scientific problems that need to be addressed and solved in order to push the frontiers of science to the next level.
Okay. What's the difference between a research scientist and a forensic scientist?
A forensic scientist can be a research scientist. Forensic scientist does a lot of research, oftentimes in the area of forensics.
Okay. And when you say when we say forensics, we're referring to utilizing science in the courtroom, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, that is a research lab, is it not?
It is a research laboratory, that's correct.
Okay. And what is the difference between a research laboratory versus a forensic laboratory?
A research laboratory works on very challenging scientific problems. We can develop techniques for forensics, pushing the frontiers of science and technology for forensics. We do not typically run routine forensic samples according to same protocol necessarily that a forensics laboratory would do.
So is it fair to say that you're not used to handling items of evidence, whereas in a forensic science lab, that is commonplace?
Overruled.
Evidence type samples are not as common in the kinds of work we do.
Okay. And in a forensic lab, another difference between the labs, or let me ask it this way, is the other difference in the labs protocols that are usually in place in a forensic lab that is not in a research lab?
I'm not sure the basis of knowledge has been established that he's ever worked in a forensic lab and would be aware of that.
Objection sustained. Establish a foundation.
Yes, sir. You're, as a scientist, you're aware of different types of laboratories, are you not?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And you're somewhat familiar of their practices, are you not?
Somewhat, yes.
Okay. And one of the things that you're aware of in a forensic lab is that they usually have much more rigid standards as it relates to protocols.
Objection, foundation, and hearsay. If I could approach, I could explain more, but
I think the witnesses testified already as to foundation, and if it's within his area of knowledge, he can certainly testify to that.
Objection overruled as to the last question, if the witness can answer the question.
I have not worked personally in a forensics laboratory.
But you're aware that they have much more rigid standards because the evidence that they handle may someday end up in court.
objection, foundation, and leading.
Sustained as the leading.
Are you aware, sir, as to whether their protocols are much more rigid than a forensic lab? Than a research lab, excuse me.
I have not run forensic protocols, so I don't know just how detailed they are.
Okay. Now, in a research laboratory, you do not have rigid protocols, correct?
Much of the time when we're doing research and development, we are working according to protocols and methods that can be varied according to the needs of a particular analytical problem that arises.
And you are not concerned necessarily with protocols. And what I mean by protocols, that's written steps of what must be done in each and every case, correct?
There are methods that we use routinely that are not written. We do it all the time. It's like driving a car. We do it as a routine part of our job, day in, day out, year after year.
You just do them. You don't necessarily have to fill out any reports or anything like that.
That is correct.
Okay. And you do not have what are known as proficiency examinations, correct?
We do not conduct proficiency examinations for forensic samples, no.
And as well as what is called quality control.
We will, in these cases, are not running a routine procedure. That is correct.
And part of the reason for all of these types of standards is to prevent, of course, contamination. You're aware of that, are you not?
Leading and foundation.
Sustained.
Are there any protocols in place in your laboratory to prevent contamination?
We run blank standards samples to see if the instrument has a large background of contaminants in it.
But that's for the actual instrument itself, correct?
Yes.
You have nothing in place for an item before it actually reaches that instrument, correct?
Objection, leading.
Overruled.
And what are you referring to? Can you clarify that, please?
Sure. If you have an item that you're going to test, there are no protocols or quality control measures in place that would prevent contamination prior to you reaching the instrument.
And how do you mean that? I still don't really quite understand what you're saying.
Well, that's what I'm asking you. Do you have any quality control practices and procedures in place that would prevent any type of contamination in your research lab before it actually reaches the machine for testing?
And how would it become contaminated? I still don't quite understand what you're trying to lead to here.
All right. Well, let me rephrase that then. Are you aware of any methods of contamination for your laboratory?
No, I'm not.
And that's because as a research scientist, you are expanding the boundaries of science. Is that not correct?
Objection, leading.
Sustained.
As a research scientist, is it your job to expand the boundaries of science?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And that is your primary focus and goal, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Not necessarily to be alert or to be worried or concerned about contamination of items of evidence.
As an analytical chemist, I am typically aware of major sources of contamination that could occur, which would be
And where you realize that is when you actually test the item, correct?
Leading.
Sustained.
Is there anything that you have in place in your laboratory that would be able to alert you to contamination other than when you actually reach your instruments?
We do not have a background monitor of sorts, no.
Okay. Now, you were given items to test in this case, were you not?
Yes, I was.
I'm sorry?
Yes, I was given items.
Okay. And how were you initially asked to test these items?
I was asked to run those samples by gas chromatography, mass spectrometry to perform a qualitative analysis to determine what was in them.
Okay. Now, how were you asked to do this? Somebody called you on the phone? How did it happen?
Dr. Arpad Vast requested that.
Okay. Did he come to your lab?
He talked to me somewhere, and
Okay.
his office is near mine.
Okay. And where did you get these items from?
They were in his office.
Okay. And he was not there that day, was he?
I believe that's correct, yes.
Okay. So was his door open?
He left me a key to get into his office.
Okay. He trusts you. So you opened the key in his office, and where do you find these items of evidence?
I don't recall exactly where they were in his office.
Okay. They're not on his desk?
They were on a desk or a file cabinet or somewhere. I don't recall exactly. It's been a while.
Okay. What container were they in?
I don't recall what kind of shipping containers they were in. One of them was a bag with a gas standard or a gas sample. The other was a metal can.
Okay. And then you took this item to your laboratory.
That's correct.
Okay. And when you got to your laboratory, you ran a test using an instrument, correct?
That's correct.
And this is the gas chromatograph mass spectrometer.
That is correct.
Okay. Now, you had no idea or no knowledge of the prior history of that item, correct?
No, I did not.
Okay. And you just mentioned that you ran what is called a qualitative analysis. What does that mean?
Qualitative analysis tells you what constituents are in the sample.
Okay. And does it tell you how much?
A qualitative analysis is not a quantitative analysis, which by definition tells you how much is there.
Okay. And when you were initially asked to do these things, did you advise Arpad Vast that a quantitative analysis would not mean anything in this case?
Objection to the question, do these things, without specifying what things he's referring to.
And what's the objection?
The objection is the question is vague in reference to these
It's
things.
vague, sustained.
Okay. The item that you were asked to test, sir, in fact, all of the items that you were asked to test in this case, did you advise Dr. Vast that a quantitative analysis, which means how much, would not mean anything in this case?
He asked me to conduct a qualitative analysis, which was the first thing that was done. At that point in time, we did not talk about quantitative analysis.
Okay. At a later point in time, well, let me take it step by step. So then you got a result, correct?
That is correct.
And the result that you received showed a high peak.
It showed a peak that was significantly above the baseline of the response of the instrument.
And the readout is called a chromatogram, right?
Yes, it's called a total ion mass chromatogram.
Okay. And what that tells you is, it tells you the peak versus what the next chemical is compared to how, let me rephrase that. That's a poorly asked question. It gives you a peak and then shows you the next peak and tells you, I guess, shows you the difference between what's there, what the different chemicals are there, correct?
Objection leading.
Sustained.
Tell us what a chromatogram shows.
A total ion mass chromatogram shows a series of peaks, can be as little as one peak or no peaks if there's nothing in the sample. But oftentimes there are several peaks there. The approximate relative height of those peaks is an approximate indication of the relative abundance of those compounds in that sample.
And it does not tell you how much of that item is there. It just shows you a comparison from one chemical to the other, right?
That is correct, yes. It's not a quantitative analysis.
Okay. And after doing this examination, you advised Dr. Voss that a quantitative analysis would not mean anything in this case, given the scenario, correct?
We actually performed a second test before that decision was reached, yes.
Okay. And that decision was made by you because you're the chemist.
To not do a quantitative, what decision are we talking about?
To not do a quantitative analysis because it wouldn't mean anything.
That was my advice, yes.
Okay. And was there ever done a quantitative analysis in this case to determine how much chloroform was there in those samples?
Okay, so in the sample where we found chloroform, it was not quantified in any of the samples because that would have been a meaningless number.
Okay. And it would have been meaningless because a trunk is a free-flowing environment, correct?
Objection leading.
Sustained.
Why would it have been a meaningless exercise?
A quantitative analysis of chloroform, let me explain. Chloroform is what is called a volatile chemical. That means that it evaporates easily. A good example of a volatile chemical is gasoline. And for example, if you pump some gasoline and you get a little drop of gasoline on your finger, you can see it and it smells very strongly of the gasoline odor. After a few minutes, that odor begins to decrease. And then after about 10 or 20 minutes, you can't smell it anymore. The reason for that is that liquid has vaporized. The molecules have moved from that surface of your fingers into the atmosphere and they're swept away. So the concentration on that surface is continually decreasing over a period of time to the point where you can no longer detect it, in this case, with your nose. Chloroform is that type of a compound. It's a volatile compound. And so if you put a drop of chloroform on a surface, starting off when you first put it on there, it's going to begin to evaporate, and over a period of minutes, hours, days, it's going to decrease. The rate at which that concentration on the surface decreases depends on a number of factors. One is the temperature that the surface is exposed to, the chemical nature of the surface is important. That will affect the rate that it evaporates. Whether or not the surface is exposed to flowing air or if it's closed up, all of those are factors that are going to affect how quickly that concentration decreases.
Let me stop you there. And if a trunk is closed, that would prevent that would slow down the volatility of the chloroform, would it not?
It won't slow the volatility, but it may not escape from the air in the trunk as easily.
Okay.
So there are a number of factors. In this case, if we had made a quantitative analysis of the amount of chloroform on the sample that we had, which was a small piece of carpet, we would have come up with a number that said there's X number of micrograms, for example, of chloroform on that piece of carpet, which is the amount on that piece of carpet at a particular snapshot in time. That little piece of carpet does not reflect the entire piece of carpet that was in this vehicle and is only a small little piece of that puzzle as well. So if we made a quantitative measurement on that little piece of carpet at the time that we received it in our laboratory, the amount that would be on that surface would be somewhat lower. Could be a little bit less. It could be a whole lot less than what was originally there. So the amount on the original carpet when it was first exposed to chloroform could have been twice as much, 5, 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times greater. And we don't have the pieces of the puzzle in order to back calculate from a quantitative measurement to what we really want to know, which is the amount that was there in the very first place when it was first exposed to the chloroform.
And because you don't have the history, you didn't even bother checking as to how much was there, because it
Sustained.
is the reason you didn't check because you didn't know the history.
Did not know the history, you would have to know the temperature in that trunk over a period of time, how it varied every single day. You would have to know when the material was deposited there, because it's been evaporating however many days it first got there. It's been going down. So if it was there for 1 day versus 30 days, the amount that was there originally could have been considerably higher. And a sample that was 30 days old versus one that was 1 day old.
And because there are so many unknowns, you did not ever come out with an amount of chloroform in the
No, I
trunk.
did not, because if I had said that on this sample, it contained a certain concentration of chloroform that would have been set in stone from that point on as being the exact concentration of chloroform in the trunk of that vehicle, and that number would have been totally meaningless because it cannot be related back to what was truly there at the very beginning.
Okay. Now, when you did these tests, you were given air samples from the trunk of the car, correct?
There was a gas bag sample, which is a little plastic bag that are sometimes used to collect a sample of air for chemical analysis.
And when you tested that air, there was virtually nothing there.
There was virtually nothing there, but my experience with many gas sampling bags is that the chemicals that you put into those tend to diffuse out over a period of a few days, and they're not good anymore. So it's not surprising that a gas sample bag did not show the presence of chloroform.
That's not surprising, but certainly you don't know what was in the air of the trunk of that car.
And I don't know what was in the vapor in that trunk.
Correct.
From what we measured, the piece of carpet that we had was a point source. That was where chloroform appeared to be coming from based on the analyses that we did.
Now let's start right there. You took the carpet and then you actually put it in a toddler bag, is that correct?
The very first analysis that was performed is we got a metal can that was sent to us that had the carpet sample in it. And the analysis I did while Dr. Vass was out of town was to barely crack the lid on that metal can, put a syringe in there, and pull a small sample of the gas out and inject it into my gas chromatograph mass spectrometer.
Okay.
That showed us that there was some chloroform there as the largest peak in that chromatogram.
And subsequent to that, you heated up the actual sample. Did you
Okay.
not?
What we did after that, I talked with Dr. Vass and I told him what I saw. I told him that the largest peak in the chromatogram was chloroform, and there were some other peaks in the chromatogram that were lower in abundance, and that in order to see those more clearly with our analytical instrumentation, we needed to concentrate the sample a little bit so that we could amplify the signal on the gas chromatograph mass spectrometer. So what we did...
Let me stop you there, sir, just so we can answer my question.
To the witness being interrupted.
He's being non-responsive.
Sir, did you finish answering the question?
Thank you, sir. Where was I? Let's see. We got the sample. We ran it, the sample from the can. We saw something. The chloroform and other constituents that we saw from that can sample was vapor that was inside that can. Okay. Couldn't say for sure where it was coming from, but it was a vapor that was in that can. Now, to establish where that vapor
I'm going to
came
object
from...
at this time. He's being non-responsive to my question. I'd like for him to answer my question.
Overruled.
Okay.
Continue.
Go right ahead.
In order to determine where the constituents came from. We took that carpet sample from the can, out of the vapor that it was in, put it in a clean gas sampling bag by itself, so the vapor is left behind, and we injected some clean air into that bag. That bag was then put into an incubator, which was held at, I believe, 35 degrees centigrade for 2 days. 35 degrees centigrade is about 95 degrees Fahrenheit, I believe. So it'd be similar to a hot summer day here in Florida. After 2 days, a sample of that air was removed that was inside the bag and then analyzed subsequently by the gas chromatograph mass spectrometer, in which again we saw chloroform as the major peak, the largest peak in the chromatogram, and we saw other peaks in there as well.
Are you finished, sir?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Now, the gas chromatograph mass spectrometer is a highly sensitive instrument, is it not?
It certainly can be, yes.
Okay. And in fact, I can give you a drop of water and you can tell me all of the different chemicals that are in there.
Down to a certain concentration level. I run my instrument so that the sensitivity for about 1 milliliter of air is in the low parts per million concentration range in air. So we can see constituents that are present at a level of, say, 2 parts out of 1 million parts of air.
And there were standards of chloroform purchased for this case, were there not?
Yes, there were.
Okay. And you did not use those standards to help measure how much chloroform was there, correct?
That's correct. As I've already stated, we did not do a quantitative analysis for the exact reasons that I told you. A quantitative analysis would have been meaningless. It would not have made any sense to assign an absolute number to the amount of chloroform that was there.
Okay, can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what you used the standards for?
The standards, when we run a gas chromatograph mass spectrometer, what we get is a series of peaks. Those peaks correspond to the amount of time that it takes for a particular chemical compound to move through a very long, thin glass tube that's inside the gas chromatograph and get to the other end. The amount of time that it takes to get from one end of the glass tube to the other end is dependent on the particular type of molecule. So chloroform, for example, takes about 16 minutes to move through that column to the end where the detector is, which is a mass spectrometer. And so when we run the instrument initially, we look at that peak, we find a peak that occurs, in this case, at 16 minutes, and we, with the help of our computer, take that peak and we can examine what is called the mass spectrum underneath that, which helps to identify the nature or identity of that particular compound. And we can do what is called a library search or a library match that takes that mass spectrum and says it looks very similar to this compound or that compound. That's called a tentative identification. In order to confirm the identification of that compound, we buy an authentic sample of that chemical. We inject it into the mass spectrometer, determine if the time that it takes to go through the column is the same as we found for our tentatively identified compound, and that the spectrum matches that. So it's a way to take something that we know the confirmed identity of and match it to the experimental data that we got.
So to be crystal clear, the standard was not used in any way, shape, or form to attempt to determine how much chloroform was on these samples.
It was not intended to do that.
Okay. I'd like to now show you Defense Exhibit CJ composite. May I approach the witness?
You may.
I may need a microphone. Can everyone hear me okay? All right. Do you recognize those notes?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and are they handwritten notes of what you're doing in the laboratory?
Yes, they are.
Okay. I'd like to refer you to the first page, page 72. No, 72, I'm looking at these page numbers. Okay. You indicate here, while you're testing the triple sorbent traps, that the system blank was reasonably clean. Is that correct?
Right, that's just a note to me. It's just to let me know what I think about the blank in the system.
Okay. And because you're a research laboratory, you don't have any standard protocols that say they must be absolutely clean.
In this case, that was not the objective, no.
Okay. In fact, you look at it and you said it's reasonably clean.
Yes.
Okay. But there's no standard for you to determine that, and that wasn't your primary
That was
goal.
not the objective in these, that's correct.
Okay. And then on page 73, you indicate that there is a very large benzene peak from the trip blank.
Yes.
What's the trip blank?
A trip blank is a triple sorbent trap that goes with the sample to the site and comes back. And if it's compromised in any way, then there could be something on that.
Okay. And does that very large benzene peak give you any indication as to whether it's compromised or not?
It would suggest,
Could I object to relevance, just ask counsel to specify which item in evidence that this is an examination of?
Yes, sir.
Baez, rephrase the question so council would know what item you're talking about.
Yes. What item are we talking about in this as that you have indicated there?
it is a trip blank from a triple sorbent trap.
Okay, of which item?
The file name was OCSOT-B01.
Okay, and would that have been one of the from one of the carpet samples?
No,
Okay, would that have been from one of the air samples?
it would have been an air sample collected somewhere down here.
Okay. Now, the items that have what is the significance of a very large benzene peak in a trip blank?
It suggests that benzene contamination has gotten into it.
Okay. You don't know how that got there?
No, it didn't.
Okay. All you noticed is that you picked up on it in the middle of your testing?
Yes, there's
Okay. Now, I'd like to refer you to page 74, where you're still discussing the triple sorbent traps. Can you put an asterisk there? What did you write? What are you trying to indicate there? I can barely read it there.
okay. I've asterisked the fact that triple sorbent trap can absorb some water, and in order to avoid having that water plug the system up, try to purge it off.
Okay. And was that a surprise to you?
No, it's not. That happens frequently with triple sorbent traps.
Okay, and that's the reason why you indicate that there.
Yes.
Okay. Now, on the following page, you put that the trap froze. What does that
Yes.
mean?
That we approach,
Yeah. Okay, members of the jury, we're going to take a stretch break to 20 minutes to allow about 7-minute stretch break. Okay? You may be seated. State recognized president of the jury. Defense,
Yes, sir, we do.
you may continue.
May I approach the witness?
You may.
Hey, Dr. Weiss, the items that you have, I'm now showing you page 74, where you put an asterisk next to that,
Yes.
that portion of your notes. What do you write there?
I'm writing that I'm trying to purge the water off the trap. I think it's important for the jury to understand what water in the trap is all about.
I understand. Go ahead.
Okay,
Explain.
I may explain that. A triple absorbent trap is a little 3-inch long stainless steel tube about 1/4 of an inch in diameter that is packed with a material that is similar to activated carbon. And in very simple terms, it is a chemical sponge that soaks constituents up out of the air so they can be concentrated and then taken out of that sponge and injected into the gas chromatograph mass spectrometer. The way that's done is heating that trap up, which vaporizes the absorbed materials and drives them into the end of the gas chromatograph. There's a 2-step process there. One is to pass a lot of air over that trap, which allows the air to go through, but causes the chemical constituents to stick to that chemical sponge. There's a lot of water in the atmosphere, particularly down here in the summertime in Florida, and so a little bit of that water vapor sticks to that chemical sponge. The second step in the process of analysis is to heat that chemical sponge up, the TST trap, drive the chemicals off of it, and to take those chemicals and pass them through a very short, narrow stainless steel loop that is immersed in liquid nitrogen. And so the chemicals are heated, they come off of that chemical sponge, the stainless steel trap that we're talking about, they vaporize, they pass into this little loop that has liquid nitrogen in it, and that freezes the chemicals right at the very beginning of that glass tube I was talking about in the gas chromatographic column.
I'm sorry, and this is related to evidence, State's Evidence 122, correct?
That's correct. What happens is that a little bit of that water, sometimes it vaporizes out of that TST trap. The sponge will get into that stainless steel loop, and over a period of a couple of minutes, very small ice crystals can form inside that loop and block the flow of air, in which case we have to warm that loop up just enough to melt the ice and to reestablish a flow of sample through it.
Why are you writing that down, though?
Just to make sure that I know that it's there. If this were a quantitative standard or a sample, I would be concerned that maybe some of the lighter chemicals that would boil at a low temperature could be lost from that trap and not be there in as great of abundance as they might otherwise have been.
So because this is a qualitative examination, your methods are a bit different.
In this case, it was not quantitative. I do want to make sure that we know that it did freeze. But let me also kind of give this analogy. It does not mean that the sample is not a qualitatively pretty good sample here.
Okay.
If you take a glass and put it on a table, fill it with ice and a cold drink, what happens is you see water condense on the outside of that glass. It's condensing the water from the atmosphere. That's kind of what's taking place inside the stainless steel loop. If you were to pour the water out of there and that glass warms up, the water doesn't all just go away immediately in the blink of an eye. It's still there. It takes some time for those chemicals to disappear. So they don't all disappear off of the trap or off of this stainless steel loop that we're using to trap them with liquid nitrogen.
And you, of course, had another chemist verify your work that it was being done correctly, right?
This is the way that we often encounter triple absorbent traps. It's not uncommon for them to freeze. A lot of samples have been run over the years that have been run in duplicates that indicate that there's not a huge difference qualitatively between samples that freeze and don't freeze.
My question, sir, is you, of course, had another chemist verify your work to see that it was done correctly.
Your Honor, we yet established which triple silver trap we're discussing?
Yes, State's Evidence 122. It was announced into the record. 122, it was announced on the record.
Dr. Vass is aware of what was run here.
Okay. Is Dr. Vass a chemist?
Dr. Vass has many years of chemistry experience working through our group and establishing analytical methods, working with mass spectrometers, approximately a dozen years worth.
So Dr. Vass is a chemist?
He is a scientist with significant analytical chemistry experience, and he has also had extensive experience working with triple sorbent traps and this particular type of a method.
My question, sir, is Dr. Vass a chemist?
He is, if you consider on-the-job training and his experience. It is not his title, but he does have the experience.
And were you hired at the Oak Ridge National Laboratories based on on-the-job training, or did you have to go to school and get a PhD in chemistry before they hired you?
I was hired as a PhD chemist, but I also learn a lot on the job and cross-cut, and actually am able to perform in other areas besides exactly what my PhD is in.
Okay. And are you aware of the last time Dr. Vass had a chemistry class was in the 1980s?
I could not tell you. I can tell you that he has worked extensively with me routinely over the past 12 years in an analytical chemistry laboratory, designing and building analytical instrumentation, running and validating analytical methods, helping to troubleshoot and repair instrumentation, helping to design and build new instrumentation.
The two of you are fairly close.
We are very close colleagues, yes we are.
Okay. And you've worked together for many years.
Yes we have.
Sustain?
And you, of course, would not. Do you have anything negative to say about Dr. Vass?
He is very talented, very intelligent.
Okay. Now, I want to get back to my original question is, did you have another chemist verify your results?
No.
Now, on the item which refers to State's Evidence 117, you write that the trap froze up?
Yes.
Okay, at what point?
At 1 minute and 50 seconds into the run.
And what did you do when the trap froze?
So I had stated a minute ago, when a trap freezes, very small ice crystals form inside the stainless steel loop. We remove the cooling liquid, allow it to warm up just enough to reestablish a flow through that loop.
And you have to let it thaw out.
You have to warm it up just enough for the water to melt and for air to be reestablished, yes.
What does State's Exhibit 117 purport to be so that you know what y'all talking about?
Yes, sir. The triple sorbent trap air sample from the trash found inside the vehicle.
Okay.
Now I'm referring you to page 76, where we're referring to State's Evidence 116. The sample froze up again, did it not?
That's correct.
Your Honor, reading specification. Which sample place that is, the numbers are a little difficult.
116, sir, relates to the air sample from the passenger area of the car. Correct? Is that
Correct.
correct? If you want to look. What's this?
Yeah.
Okay. And now on page 79, you write that the system blank appeared to be clean. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that is for the standards, correct?
That's correct.
Now, on page 82, you write with two asterisks that you decided to abort this run and
It's not in evidence unless it's impeachment of some
Sustained.
sort?
Are there any issues that you run into with this item? At first, describe what it is you're doing and the issues that you have there.
I was going to run a blank on the system, and after I started the run, I just noticed that I had not changed the computer program to set the conditions to where I wanted them, so I stopped it and I reset the conditions.
You caught yourself in the middle of an error.
I did, yes.
Okay. And because you're a research laboratory, you do not have standard protocols or a checklist that would prevent this from happening. You have to rely on your own self to catch your own errors.
Pleading. Compound question.
Overruled, you can ask the question if you can.
I've already stated this was not run according to a numbered or lettered protocol. That's correct.
We understand that, but I just want
Yes.
to make sure. Okay. Now, on page 86, you have another asterisk there where you caught yourself in another error. Is that correct?
Counsel is reading from a document that's not in evidence.
Sustained.
Did you, were you working with standards? Can you describe what standards you were working with on
This
page?
was a standard to determine the retention time of a sample on the gas chromatograph.
Is this sample 116 again?
No, this is a standard. It's not an actual item. And did you catch yourself in an error there?
Yes, I did. I noticed that it did not appear to be as it should be.
Okay.
Yes.
And again, you do not have protocols that would prevent this. You have to rely on you catching yourself making errors.
I told you we did not run these according to a numbered or lettered standard method.
Okay. Did Dr. Voss catch you in this mistake, or did you catch yourself?
I caught these, yes.
Okay. Now, on 87, did you catch another error on the standards?
That was a continuation of the prior.
Oh, okay. And did you change something in the middle of your process?
This again was running a standard of a compound that smells really bad. And so, yes, I changed the way it was injected to keep from smelling up my laboratory. Yes.
And because you don't have specific protocols, you have to adjust what it is that you're doing to get the desired results, correct?
Objection, leading.
Sustained, rephrase the question.
Yes, sir. Did you have to change your procedure in the middle of your examination?
I changed it voluntarily to keep from smelling my laboratory up. Yes, but it does not affect the determination of what I needed to determine, which is the retention time and mass spectrum of that sample.
Okay. Now, on page 89, you expected to see something in one of the standards, but you did not, correct?
That's the same standard that I was just talking about that
And,
does not smell good. It's sticky.
and what did you expect to see that you didn't find there?
I did not see it come through the gas chromatograph, which meant that it was being held up somewhere in the system or not being injected as it should have.
And you put asterisks and you put it in a special box because it was something that was somewhat of an error, correct?
Yes.
Something unexpected.
It's unexpected, and yes, I wanted to make sure it was corrected. That's
Did Dr. Voss catch that, or did you catch that?
I ran those standards, yes.
On page 90, did you make an adjustment because you didn't see certain things there?
This again is the same standard that smells bad. The idea was to get it into the instrument as cleanly and easily as possible to get the retention time and the mass spectrum of it.
Okay.
This is,
You had to make adjustments in the middle of these runs.
but are not adjustments that would affect the information that was to be obtained for that particular sample.
My question, sir, is you had to make adjustments in the middle of the run.
Objection asked and answered.
Overruled, you can ask the question.
You had to make adjustments in the middle of the run.
I made adjustments voluntarily to get the sample run, yes.
And that's because you did not see dimethyl trisulfide.
I could not see it under that prior conditions, yes.
You didn't see it where you expected to see it.
It would not go through the inlet because it's a heavy material and sticky.
So the answer to my question is yes.
Yes.
Okay. On page 93, was there an issue that messed up this run?
Yes, it's a closed valve.
Okay. And did you catch yourself in an error there?
Yes,
Do you know what item this is involved with?
This is involving a standard.
it's a retention time standard. It's the same one.
And on page 94, do you note that you continue to have problems?
Yes.
Okay. And was there any time during the process of inspecting these items that your instruments broke down?
I don't recall.
Okay. You don't recall, or is it possible that you had issues with your gas chromatograph mass spectrometer?
Objection calls for speculation and.
Sustained.
I'll rephrase the question. Are you aware, sir, that your gas chromatograph mass spectrometer broke down while studying these samples?
Objection asked and answered and assumes a fact not an evidence.
Overruled.
You can answer.
It did not break down. No, there was looks like the loop on the front end during running that standard was dirty based on the prior experiments, which was troubleshooting and finding the source of that issue.
And you do not have any quality control methods that would prevent this from happening when you're actually working a forensic case, do you not?
Leading.
Sustained.
Do you have any quality control standards that would prevent this from happening?
Objection. Same question, still leading.
It's not leading, Judge.
Sustained.
Do you have any quality control methods, sir?
In these cases, the quality control is to look at the sample and determine whether or not the retention time is the same for the authentic standard that is injected.
You are the quality control, essentially, are you not?
Objection. Leading. Could we approach, Your Honor?
No. Objection sustained.
Are you, sir, the only method of quality control in your laboratory as you run these types of samples?
I am a primary method of determining that the instrument is functioning correctly, yes.
Okay. And there are no other chemists that worked on this case other than yourself?
Myself and Dr. Vass ran the samples, that is correct.
Okay. Dr. Voss is not a chemist, right?
Dr. Vass is very qualified.
Okay. He's not a chemist, though, is he, sir?
That's not his written title.
Okay. Now, I'd like to direct your attention to did there ever come an occasion where you worked on a case where you issued standard protocols for the collection of volatile, of soil samples for analysis?
No, we did, yes.
Okay. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
now showing you, sir, Defense Composite CK. Do you recognize that document?
Yes.
And you authored that document?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And does this inform anyone who's collecting samples that they should avoid?
Objection, reading the document that is not in evidence.
Sustained.
Do you, in these, have you ever issued protocols, sir, that suggest that samples should not be collected near areas of gasoline or any items like that, any volatile compounds?
This was for the collection of soil samples, yes.
Okay, so the answer is yes.
Objection to relevance of protocols for collection of soil samples to this case.
Relevance?
The results, if I can go one more step, Judge, I can connect the relevance.
Go ahead.
And the reason for this, sir, is because, if I can finish the question.
Let him
Judge.
finish the question, Mr. Ashton.
Okay. Is the reason that you have these protocols to prevent contamination and to prevent false readings?
Objection, leading.
Sustained.
Why, sir, do you have that protocol?
When collecting soil samples, the objective is to collect them in an area that is pristine as possible.
Okay. And is the reason for that is because you want to be able to determine what is actually there?
Objection, leading.
Sustained.
What's the reason for that, sir?
It is to avoid contamination whenever possible.
Okay. And can contamination come from gasoline?
Objection, Your Honor. Could we approach?
You may. You may continue.
Can you review that document and make sure that you familiarize yourself with it again?
Yes, this is a document for the collection of soil samples to test them at a later date for the presence of volatile organic compounds.
Approach the witness, Judge, and get that from you. Do your protocols, sir, recommend that the collection locations should be free of trash, debris, and obvious sources of chemicals that could result in false positive readings?
Objection, relevance of soil sample collection protocols to this case.
I think the witness, Judge, has,
Soil samples sustained.
soil samples aside, sir, do you recommend that collection for samples should be free of trash, debris, and obvious sources of chemicals that could result in false positive readings?
It depends on what the objective.
Objection, what type of sample is counsel asking about? Water, air?
Any samples,
Sustained. Rephrase the question.
sir, when running samples, regardless of the sample that you're running, do you recommend that the locations be free of trash, debris, and obvious sources of chemicals that can result in false positive readings?
It depends on the objective of the analysis. In some cases, the sample is part of a trash heap, and therefore it is necessary to collect it in the presence of whatever is there.
If you were collecting a carpet sample, would you recommend that it be free of trash, debris, and obvious sources of chemicals that could result in false positive readings?
Again, in some cases, you have no choice as to where to collect a particular sample because it's where it is, and whatever else is there is part of that environment that it's in.
Do you recommend that an item that you're testing be separate and preferably apart from any other items?
Objection, asked and answered.
Sustained.
I don't believe he's answered the question, Judge. Could a false positive reading come from trash, debris, and other source chemicals?
Objection, a false positive reading for what?
Sustained. Rephrase the question.
Yes, sir. Any items that you test, could you get a false positive reading for trash, debris, and other chemicals.
Same objection, Judge. A false positive reason for what?
I've made it a very general and broad question, Judge.
Sustain. Ambiguous.
Okay. When running air samples, sir, do you recommend that trash and debris, an obvious source of chemicals, not be part of the sample?
Sometimes that's exactly what you want to monitor.
If you're not testing trash,
Sometimes you cannot separate the two. It
My question
depends
to
on the
you, sir.
objective of the analysis.
my question to you, sir, is if you're not testing trash and you're testing a specific item, do you recommend that it not be near any trash?
Sustain. We've asked this question numerous times in various fashions. Move on to another area.
Do you recommend, sir, that collected samples not be stored at locations that are contaminated with organic chemical vapors such as gasoline?
That is always a good thing to do, if at all possible.
Okay. Now, you are aware, sir, that there was trash found in the vehicle that was tested, right?
I did not see the inside of the vehicle.
I didn't ask that. I asked you, sir, that you are aware that trash was found inside the trunk of the vehicle, right?
I believe that is correct.
Okay. Now, being aware of that, do you know the location of where the trash was?
I do not have any idea whatsoever.
Okay. Did you request when collecting these samples that you get a non-stained portion of the trunk of the vehicle?
I did not request the samples at all.
Okay. Would a non-stained portion give you an identification as to whether your sample was coming from the stain or another non-stained area?
You need to rephrase that. I don't understand.
Okay. You tested a piece of carpet that was allegedly stained. Isn't that correct?
That I got a piece of carpet. I assume it was stained based on what I understand.
So did you say, if I want to compare this piece, we should compare it to a non-stained portion to be able to determine what's in that stain?
I, again, did not request the samples that were sent to me. I was requested to analyze samples that were given to me.
So the answer is a no?
I did not request the samples, or I made that clear.
Instead, what you decided to compare it to were stains from or carpet samples from completely different cars in a junkyard, did you not?
Objection leading.
Sustain.
What did you compare them to then, sir?
I did not decide what samples were to be collected or what the comparison should be.
I didn't ask you that, sir. I asked you what you compared it to.
There was a carpet sample collected from another vehicle, yes.
Okay. From a junkyard in Tennessee.
I do not know the exact location. I did not collect the sample.
Are you not a co-author of the report in this case?
I was, yes.
And is it not a fact, sir, that you indicate in that report that these are carpet samples from a junkyard?
Objection leading.
Sustain.
Does the report, sir, indicate where these samples were collected from?
I don't have it in front of me, but
Do you not recall?
I think it was from a car that was in a junkyard, yes.
Okay. So when you answered a moment ago, you didn't recall, but now you do?
You are asking me what?
Yeah, I asked
Was a
you.
sample from a junkyard? Is that the question?
The first time I asked you, sir, you said you do not recall where they were collected from.
I do not
then-
know the
let me finish the
location
question.
of,
Objection, can the witness be allowed to answer, please?
Not finished with the question, sir. I was just instructing the witness.
Well, sir, finish answering the question.
I have no idea what yard, junkyard, or wreck car yard, or anything else the sample came from. I've never been there myself. I did not collect the sample.
My question to you, sir, is initially when I asked you where these samples were collected from, you said you had no idea where they were collected from. 30 seconds later, you recalled that they were from a junkyard, did you not?
You said that they were, and they were from, I think it was listed as a junkyard, but I don't know where. I don't know where that junkyard is. I do not know the location of it.
Are you aware that it came from Tennessee?
I believe so, yes.
If I can have just one moment, Judge.
You may.
Finish. There was a addition, when you reviewed the report, sir, there was an addition that you chose to make, did you not?
Yes, I did.
And this was after reviewing what Arpad Voss had indicated in his report?
I don't know if it was after reviewing it or just a suggestion for the report.
And the suggestion that you wanted to add is that these chemicals that were found in these samples could also be associated with other types of materials.
Yes, and let me make it perfectly clear. In a mass chromatogram, if you take any one peak, there is nothing in the data that says where that particular compound came from. It says that it's there, but it doesn't say what the source was. And I cannot tell you the source of any single one particular compound that we've analyzed.
If I can have just a moment, Judge.
You may.
Sir, are you aware that air samples were taken 6 weeks after the carpet sample was sent to you?
Taken where? I don't know.
Okay. Are you aware that you later received air samples from the forensic bay garage?
What kind of air samples were these?
Samples of air, triple sorbent traps from the forensic bay?
No, we've talked about the triple sorbent traps, yes. We've already talked about
As
this.
well as the passenger area of the car?
Yes,
As well as the trunk of the car?
yes,
As well as the trash that was found in the car?
yes.
And you are aware that these samples were taken 6 weeks after the car liner was removed?
That's correct.
Okay.
I believe that's what I've been told anyway.
And you would agree that the air 6 weeks later, depending on the environment, would be significantly different than what it would have been previously?
Sustain.
Is the air the same? Would the air be the same in the forensic bay garage 6 weeks later?
I have no way of knowing that.
Okay. Would the fact that it has a garage door that opens and closes make a difference?
I have no way of knowing how the air has changed over a period of time.
Okay. And what about the trash? Do you think that the trash would still have the same air 6 weeks later?
I have no way of knowing what the changes, if any, are.
And in your experience, there's no way you can determine that.
Sustain. Rephrase the question.
Is there any way of knowing that based on your experience, sir?
I have no way of knowing if and how much it has changed, no.
Now, I've shown you Defense Exhibit CJ, and you had a chance to review it, correct?
Which is,
May I approach?
You may.
yes, okay.
And these are your notes?
Yes, they are.
Do they accurately reflect the notes that you took when
Yes.
you took them?
Yes.
Judge, unless there's any objection, I would move CJ into evidence.
Hearsay, it also appears to contain certain interlineations or highlightings by counsel and other notations, but.
Objection
for those
sustained.
reasons.
Judge, I can redact, or submit another one that's not highlighted.
Objection sustained.
I have just one more moment, Judge.
You may.
I'm open to questions.
Cross-examination.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
You have had a great deal of experience in examining environmental air samples in various aspects of your work. Is that correct?
Yes, I have.
Did you work with Dr. Voss at some level in some of his research involving decomposition odor, at least at the later stages?
I have worked with him in collecting and analyzing samples, yes.
Give the jury a general variety of what kinds of air samples you've had occasion to examine over your career and what types of circumstances.
I've looked at air samples from soil, various surfaces, ambient air, just about every kind of environmental type of a sample and matrix you can think of.
Now, your initial analysis of the carpet in the can was simply to basically suck out a volume of air and run it unconcentrated into the gas chromatograph, correct?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
And upon doing that, the biggest peak you found was for chloroform.
That is correct. The abundant, the tallest peak in that total ion mass chromatogram was chloroform, which indicates it is a major, if not the major peak.
And while you cannot, you also saw peaks consistent with gasoline fumes.
We did in the sample, certainly the one that was concentrated. Yes, we did.
But the peak for chloroform was far greater than the peaks for gasoline.
The relative abundance in the total ion mass chromatogram for the chloroform was greater than the peaks for, they would correspond potentially to gasoline vapors. Yes.
Now, you wouldn't have been surprised to have found evidence of gasoline vapors in a trunk of a car.
Absolutely not. I've analyzed many samples that have been collected in and around vehicles that have fuel or fuel exhaust vapors associated with them.
And the amount of chloroform you found even in this initial run surprised you.
Judge, the witness has already testified that this is not a quantitative analysis.
I don't believe that's
Overruled.
The relative abundance of the chloroform seemed very unusual to me because, number one, chloroform is a suspected cancer-causing agent. It's not something that you just normally find in a sample. You find it in particular types of samples, but not just usually sitting out in the open, or I would not expect to find it in the trunk of a vehicle, but I cannot say where it came from. I cannot tell you where any chemical came from based on the kind of analysis that I do.
And as counsel pointed out, while you didn't do a quantitative analysis to reveal exactly how much chloroform was there, but you were able to gain some information about relative abundance from the gas chromatograph.
That's correct.
And was it your opinion that it was somewhere in the low parts per million range?
This witness, again, has not given a quantitative amount. It's not in evidence. Assumes facts not in evidence.
Overruled if he can answer the question.
Again, I hate to place a quantitative number on there because when I do that, then it becomes an absolute.
Sure.
It was detectable at levels. My instrument has a sensitivity threshold for approximately 1 milliliter of gas that's in the low part per million range. This was significantly above the baseline.
All right.
I do not want to quantify it beyond that.
All right. So just so the jury understands, your machine is set at sort of 1 part per million, and anything above that should register.
That's in a very crude sense.
In a very crude sense, and that's how we lawyers talk, in a very crude sense. All right. Now, when you ran the concentrated sample, did you find that the relative abundance of chloroform to other compounds was similar?
It looked very similar, yes.
Now, when you found the chloroform originally, did you attempt to do some research through sources that you would normally do as a chemist to determine whether that chloroform could have come from some car-related product that you might not have known about?
The chloroform, when I first saw it, raised a question in my mind because I did not expect to see it there. When we concentrated the sample, It was, again, the most abundant peak. Dr. Vass and I, one evening, sat down together just contemplating why was it there. I did look at some material data safety sheets for some common car products, cleaners, and brake type cleaners, just to see if there would be some evidence of why that might be chloroform in the back of the car. It was not an exhaustive study, though, to look at products. It's just solved my own personal curiosity as to where it might have come from.
So you just spent a couple hours looking things up to see if there was some common product.
If I had found something, and I would have said, okay, this is maybe a good explanation. But again, I cannot say where it came from or why it was there.
Of course.
Okay.
But you weren't able to find any explanation for its possible existence through that research.
With that very limited
Of course.
amount of work, and it's not exhaustive. Just let me make sure that you're clear on that.
So you spent a couple hours just trying to think of something that it might be and look that up, but you obviously couldn't think of everything.
That is correct. It'd be a long, drawn-out process to try to look up every single compound that was there.
All right. Now, is it generally accepted in the analytical chemistry community that certain polymers can sometimes trap volatiles?
Yes. What are you referring to exactly?
Well, I'm just saying, you said that the chloroform is a volatile, that it evaporates quickly.
Yes.
Are there certain substances that can sometimes trap it, such as polymers or what the carpet is made out of, anything like that?
Yes, absolutely. Almost every material that is made out of carbon-based molecules, which includes virtually all plastics, are able to interact with organic molecules that also have a carbon backbone, and they will tend to absorb or adhere to those molecules to some degree or another. Yes.
Now, you also said that the reason you didn't do the quantification was because whatever quantity of chloroform you had at that moment in time, you would never have enough information to relate it back precisely to what it was at an earlier point.
That is correct. I said that because of several reasons. One is only in a small section of the carpet. I don't know if the amount of chloroform is uniform or how it was spread over the entire carpet. I don't know the rate of evaporation. I don't know the temperature that it was exposed to. All of those affect the rate of evaporation, whether or not the trunk was opened or closed or how frequently that was occurring. So there's no way at all that I could have made a quantitative analysis in any way, shape, or form, related that accurately back to the true total amount of chloroform that initially was in that vehicle when it first was exposed to the substance.
So in other words, that the piece of carpet you had could have been the most stained with chloroform or the least stained with chloroform. You have no way of knowing.
There's absolutely no way to know. It's only one little piece of the puzzle. The rest of the puzzle was somewhere else.
And it could have been from a car that had been closed for its entire time, or it might have been open half the time, closed half the time. That all would have affected ultimately how much chloroform there was to begin with.
That is correct, and those are things that could not be, it'd be a total guess.
Could not be known.
It could not be known, and so I did not do the quantitative analysis, because if I did and said that just hypothetically 50 parts per billion of chloroform had been found in that, or parts per million of chloroform had been found in that sample, it would have been extrapolated to be the exact concentration that was there, and that would be absolutely, totally incorrect.
Okay. Now, you would be of the opinion, though, that whatever amount of chloroform was there, it would have been greater in the past. In other words, chloroform doesn't increase over time, it decreases.
Yes, and we demonstrated that when we took the carpet out of the can and put it into a bag with clean air, because chloroform appeared in the air that was in that clean bag, and the only place it could have come from was chloroform evaporating off of that little piece of carpet sample.
That was the next thing I was going to ask you. Based on the way you performed this analysis, it was clear that the substance was actually in the carpet.
It was associated with the carpet some way, either in the carpet or something that was spilled on the carpet, but associated with that little piece of carpet.
The point of taking it out of the can was to separate the carpet from the air around the carpet, which might have reflected air around the carpet in the trunk.
That is correct.
Did that make any sense what I just
Yes,
said?
that is correct.
So what you were testing both for chloroform and for the other compounds that Dr. Voss found were things that were coming directly from the carpet.
That is correct, yes.
Counsel asked you about a notation where you said about an air blank being, what was the word? I don't know if it was mostly clean or quite clean, some word, some modifier like that.
Yes.
When you're running a trip blank, an air blank, are you running just room air?
It's usually run room air, yes.
Okay. And is that a standard procedure in chemistry to run a blank with room air, whatever's just sort of there?
I do, because it just checks to see what's in my room.
Okay.
Okay.
And is any air in any room completely devoid of compounds?
No.
So any air from any place is not completely clean. It can't.
If you look hard enough, you're going to find something in just about every air sample. That is correct.
The various issues that were noted in your lab notes, the reason you put them in your lab notes is to make sure that you have a complete record of anything that was in any way out of the ordinary in the running of the test, correct?
Yes, that's correct. That is my responsibility to do that.
That's so that other people can know exactly what happened.
That's right. And when it comes down to ultimately working up and developing a standard written procedure, we know the types of things that need to be avoided or considered in the procedural steps.
When you're inventing a protocol for other laboratories to use, you want to know to tell them, well, this might be a problem to look out for, that might be a problem to look out for.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. Yes.
Was there anything that occurred in the running of any of these samples that was extraordinary or extraordinarily out of order?
No, I did forget to close a couple of valves, but I did notice that the instrument did not function quite right. To me, my analytical instruments are my car that I drive. You know that when you drive a car and have a flat tire, you notice it right away. My analytical instruments, when something goes wrong, I notice that and very quickly can correct it.
Now, the purpose in obtaining control samples from the garage or the passenger area of the car or the garbage is to try to determine if any of those samples might have contributed to what you found in the trunk carpet.
And that is correct, yes.
And the fact that it was 6 weeks later, it was the best you could get.
That's correct, yes. It's probably,
Yeah. If it was. I mean, you can't go back in time
Right.
in a time machine and grab a sample from,
Both of you can't talk at the same time?
you can't go back in time and grab a sample from a time 3 weeks before you needed it.
That's correct, yes,
You got to
sir.
take it from when you can get it.
Yes, sir.
All right. Mr. Baez has asked you at length about Dr. Voss and his qualifications. How long have you worked with Dr. Voss in doing studies related to chemistry?
Probably 12 or 13 years now.
Now, in the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, are you each simply limited to your own specialty, or do you work together and sort of move into each other's areas?
A national laboratory is a national resource of scientists that interact together all the time so that we can take advantage of each other's specialties and expertise and learn from one another to broaden our horizons.
Has Dr. Voss worked on projects with you that had nothing to do with anthropology?
Yes, absolutely.
That had nothing to do with dead bodies or his area of specialty?
Absolutely. He's been a major contributor to projects involving the development of mass spectrometers, the validation of the performance of those instruments with standard samples, with the development of protocols for the analysis of biological samples. And one of the things that I really enjoy about Dr. Voss is his eagerness to continually learn. One of the things he says to me on a regular basis is, Mark, teach me what you know, because when I do something and he says, wow, all the time, wow, how did you know how to do that? And so he comes in, he wants to work with me and learn, not just from me, but from other people that we have in our group and other locations around the laboratory.
And has that been his continuing method of learning over the last 16 years? I think you said you've worked with.
It's
Proper bolstering.
Sustained, we covered that enough.
All right. No further questions.
Redirect? Oh, no.
Just briefly, Judge. Mr. Ashton asked you about the different projects that you worked with Dr. Voss. One of those projects is the Labrador, is it not?
That is correct, yes.
And that's that handheld sniffer machine that is currently patented.
It's not patented yet.
Okay. And the application for the patent, you are also one of the beneficiaries of that patent, are you
I
not,
am
sir?
a co-inventor, but not really a beneficiary.
You would stand to earn royalties if that machine is validated and sold across the country, would you not, sir?
All scientists at Oak Ridge National Laboratory are required to report any inventions. Most of those patents, including Labrador, end up being assigned to the company, and only a minimal royalty would be received from that if it were ultimately sold to non-government users.
So the answer is yes?
Absolutely minimal.
Yes?
Minimal. Yes, minimal.
Okay. I'll take that.
This
Now-
okay.
Sir, so this project that you had, all the work you did in this, you billed it to the Labrador project, did you not?
Every field analytical instrument requires the analysis of field samples in order to determine what kind of constituents are present in the kind of environment that that instrument will be operated in. If you don't know that ahead of time, you end up building an instrument that will not function in the presence of interferences that are present in the real world. So running field samples such as this are very valuable for a project such as Labrador.
I don't know if you understood my question. My question was, sir, that you billed the work you did to the Labrador project.
I don't
grant
know for
from the Labrador
certain. I
project.
was working on the Labrador at that time. These samples are certainly consistent with the scope of that work.
So is that a yes?
I do not know for certain. I work on multiple projects.
Okay. Do you believe that the work that you billed this out to was the Labrador project?
It is very likely, and it certainly fits within the scope of that project, yes.
And as a research scientist, you have to earn grants, do you not?
Objection, leading. This is direct.
Sustained, rephrase your question.
What are some of the requirements that you have as it relates to generating income for the laboratory?
We write proposals to develop technologies in the case of the Labrador, yes.
And this is so you can get grants of money from the government and other sources?
They are funded research projects, yes.
And one of the research projects is the Labrador project.
That is a research project, yes.
Okay. And as your job, it's a requirement that you generate funds, correct?
Yes, it is.
Otherwise, your position may be eliminated.
And certainly all of us who are researchers have a requirement to seek research funding. That is correct.
And if your technology is validated in a court of law, that makes this Labrador a lot easier to sell, does it not, sir?
Objection assumes a fact, not an evidence that this has anything to do with Labrador technology.
Sustained.
The Labrador technology is based on the work of Dr. Voss, is it not?
Labrador was an instrument I designed the electronics for in the sensing head. It is a sensor that is based on a very different detection technology than the GCMS, and in a very broad sense, looks at the full range of chemicals that occur in human decomposition.
Which is based on the work of Arpad Voss?
In a very, very loose sense, but the technology that is used in the field, such as Labrador, has to be validated and stand on its own merit. Nobody is going to buy a field instrument just because they heard about it in a court proceeding. The people who use field technologies are very hardworking people who have difficult jobs. They're law enforcement agencies. They are first responders. They're military personnel. They do not need to have something that doesn't work. They will not buy something that doesn't work. It has to be an instrument that functions, does the job that they need, and that means it has to have its own independent validation and testing. And there is no way that anything that takes place in this court proceeding will in any way validate the Labrador.
Do you, in your patent proposal, do you deny, sir, that in your patent proposal there is a indicator that there is mention that these are validated in a court of law?
Objection. Scope of cross, relevance, assumes a fact,
Objection
not an
sustained
evidence.
goes to a collateral issue.
Sir, how many times since you've been involved in this case, has the Labrador been promoted in the media for this? Since you've been involved in this particular case?
Labrador was not used in this case whatsoever. Labrador was in the process of being designed. I was developing the electronics. It did not even exist until about a year after we ran these initial samples. And I certainly had no crystal ball that says the sample I'm running today is going to in any way enhance the ability of an instrument that has not been built yet or known to function yet or anything else having to do with Labrador. It's just, there is not a relationship between this case and Labrador.
Sir, are you understanding my questions?
Objection to counsel's statement.
Sustained.
My question to you, sir, is how many times has Labrador been promoted since you've been involved in this case?
I have no idea.
But you would agree, sir, that of course it's been promoted significantly since being involved in this case.
It would
Fact,
have,
not an evidence, leading, and relevance collateral issue.
Sustained.
Now, you talked about testing all types of environmental samples, but yet this is the first time you've actually examined a carpet sample, is it not?
I did not say I've tested all kinds. I've tested a very wide variety.
But never a carpet sample.
I don't recall. It's been a while if I have.
Okay. You can't recall a single occasion where you've examined a carpet sample.
I do not recall. If I have, it's been a while back, and I have long enough back that I cannot specifically remember.
So you cannot emphasize on any of your experience as to what you would normally find in a carpet sample.
No, I cannot say what I would expect to find in a carpet sample. I have not personally analyzed a wide variety of carpet samples and know what is there.
And one of the other carpet samples that you got from the junkyard had chloroform in it.
It did have a small amount of chloroform in it.
Now, you just said small amount.
Yes, it was.
Was that a quantitative analysis?
Interrupted.
Sustained.
The response was just a little bit above the baseline of the response of the instrument.
And did you do a quantitative analysis on that
It
one?
was not quantitative. I did not indicate that it was a part per million or anything else.
Okay.
That is a
and-
qualitative statement.
Okay, sir. And Mr. Ashton pointed out that you did research to find out about this, the possible explanations of chloroform. Do you recall that line of questioning?
I did look at some material data sheets, yes.
Okay. And what your research basically consisted of is you Googled a few items, right?
I looked up some material data sheets. I said it was not an exhaustive study by any stretch, just some common product that you might find in the back of a vehicle.
You Googled a few products, right?
That's right. It was not exhaustive by any stretch.
And you spent about an hour looking up, Googling items?
I don't recall exactly how long, no.
Okay. And you would certainly not base or render any opinions based on that limited amount of Googling, correct?
As I have indicated, I cannot tell from my data where any chemical comes from. I will not say that because this chemical is here, that it came from this source or this source or this source. I cannot make that determination.
And you are aware that chloroform can be found in cleaning products as well as adhesives. Are you?
I do not know where all chloroform might be. I do not have that information.
Did you find any of that in your Googling?
I did not see anything that had any chloroform in it in what I looked at, no.
And did you, my question is, when you Googled, did you find cleaning products that contain chloroform?
I did not do an exhaustive
answered.
study.
Sustained.
I have no further questions.
The Labrador was designed primarily for use by law enforcement and the military, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And if a device is used by either one of those governmental agencies, there are no royalties, isn't that correct?
That is correct, sir.
So this device was designed to be used by people who could not possibly pay you any royalties.
That is correct.
No further questions?
May the witness be excused.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Mr. Baez?
I just have a brief follow-up on that issue.
Wait, let me hear the question. Go ahead.
I didn't excuse the witness.
Ask your question.
Yes, sir. Sir, I didn't understand you correctly. Are you saying that if this Labrador is produced and sold, that you nor your laboratory would generate any money?
As far as my understanding of the patent process, the United States government is allowed to use any patented technology free of royalty.
And as an inventor, you would have 15% of that, would you not?
I'm just saying I would not get a royalty for government use because it would be a royalty-free use.
Federal government use?
And I don't know if that extends to state government or not. I do not know.
So if it's sold to law enforcement in Apopka, Florida, you would generate income
I
from that,
do
would
not
you
know.
It was a fact, not an evidence. Ask and answer.
Sustained.
I have no further questions.
Okay, thank you, sir. You may be excused.
Thank you.